to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. My name is Matt Valley, and I believe researchers and insights pros often take the scenic route to this industry, and it makes for unique perspectives and great stories that I love to share with you here on the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. Today's guest is Paul Koelle, who has had a career of progressive responsibility of about 11 years or so for a company that you've probably heard of called C-Space, who's really a pioneer in the creation and leveraging of communities for the purpose of generating insights for their clients. Really cool company based in Boston. But before he did that, Paul was the drummer of a commercially successful garage rock band. And that's usually a contradiction of terms, commercially successful and garage rock, but it applies in this case. And that band was called Red Yellow, and they're really, really cool. They were active in the early to mid aughts. Thrashy, youthful, punkish energy and attitude. Just awesome stuff. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. That's a great way to describe it. I couldn't have said it better myself.
You just have to listen to it once, and you can't avoid those adjectives. So
yeah,
super
I
cool.
like it.
It's so far up my alley. It's great stuff. I'll make sure to link to it here so people can see it. But let's jump in and let's start with your day job, Paul. So you're working in insights at C-Space. You've been there for a while. How did you get into this space?
Yeah, so I basically fell into it. I think that's how you've had guests. You've asked in the past. How did you get in? Did you kind of fall into insights? A lot of people seem to kind of fall into the insights space, and that definitely describes me. After I graduated college, I moved to New York City. I went to UMass out in the sticks of Western Massachusetts. Primarily because the Pixies wrote a song about it. Sonic Youth lived out there. There's some more Kim Gordon, and Jay Mascis was like from there. And that's not really the only reason, but it helped push me in that direction. I was either going to go to Boston or Western Mass, and I was like, Western Mass seems cool. How all this good music come out there? I must go there and see what that's all about.
Cool.
So it ended up being a good decision. So I went to UMass, graduated, went to New York, and then I started working in marketing because I needed a job really. And I worked for the New York City Bar Association running their marketing program, and did that for a year. And then I quit my job to go on tour with my band, which we can talk about that. But I quit my job, went to Europe, did some touring. Did that for about 5 years, professionally, full time. Didn't make any money, but had a lot of fun. And then after that, I came kind of back into the corporate world. So I got a late start, I guess, into the 9-to-5 kind of corporate environment. But I worked at a startup after my music career kind of, I guess I could say, ended, or I shifted gears back into the corporate world. I worked at a startup for a few years. That was around the 2008, 2009 when the financial crisis was hitting. So everything dried up. They went out of business. And then I was looking for another job, and I found Communispace, which is now C-Space. And I didn't know. All I knew was when I went on the website and I looked at the people, because they had pictures and bios of everybody, I was like, these seem like my kind of people. This feels like my kind of company. And
Right.
It was attractive. It was young. It was smart. It was funny, sense of humor, but hardworking.
Right.
And the client roster was amazing. So I interviewed for basically an exec admin position because I didn't have a lot of working background. I was coming out of music. And I ended up working with the chief client officer there, and she actually hired me because she said she Googled my name and saw some band pics of me, some sweaty band pictures of me being crazy band pictures. She's like, I want to hire that guy. So I was like, that explains the fit, we were, it was just the right place to land. And this is circa 2009. I've been there ever since 2009. And that, online communities were still relatively, newer at that point. There wasn't a ton of competition. We were growing double digits every year. This is the financial crisis. Everybody else was doing layoffs. We were hiring. Couldn't fill. We had to move our office. It was so it was a great upward trajectory, and I was really attracted to that. And then through my 11 years, that's really how I became. I really started to understand insights working at C-Space. But before that, I had no idea. I thought market research focus groups, stodgy, sit around a table, survey, that kind of thing. I didn't know how cool it could be and how fun it
Yeah.
could be.
Well, it definitely is cool, and you're proof of that, right? So,
I guess
cool.
so.
All right. So you alluded to it already. You had a career before you headed into insights, a career as a drummer. That's what I would like to be when I grow up. So let's hear about that.
Kindred spirit. Yeah. So I started playing when I was 8 years old. And really my impetus for wanting to play was, seeing uh, Ricky Rocket from Poison on MTV. And it was the coolest looking thing. I mean, these guys were having the time of their lives. And I'm like, that's a job. Like you could do that. Like these people do this. I'm like, I want that job. That's the job I want. So my brother was playing guitar, and so he started taking lessons. He's a year and a half older, so we're very close in age. So I was like,
Mhm.
well, I'm going to play drums. I want to be Ricky Rocket. So I started taking lessons at 8 years old from a jazz teacher in my neighborhood who was like really strict, really older school guy. And for the first year, he just made me do Buddy Rich rudiments. That's it.
Yeah.
No drum set. Didn't touch a drum set for a year. Um, so eventually, I got the drum kit. Started jamming with my brother. We did that every day. You know, Grew up, got into high school, kept playing with kids in high school and friends, and I was playing with my brother every day. It's all we did. We just played music in our basement. That was our hobby. That's all
Hmm.
we ever, if it was free time, that's what we were doing. Um, and so I did that through high school. Got into the grunge scene, early '90s grunge, explosion, and went from hair metal to like grunge rock
Hmm.
and like bands like Nirvana and stuff. And then through that, I was like, oh, there's punk. And so then I started digging layers deeper and getting into punk rock, and then playing in punk bands in high school and doing club shows and really small house parties with like adults who were like in their
Yeah.
20s who I thought were ancient.
Yeah.
But I was like 15. So I started playing out at a young age.
Hmm.
Um, and then, like I said, I went out to UMass, and that's when Red Yellow was formed. Um, I went to UMass and met a friend, and we started a little band and played some dorm shows. And these three kids, had seen one of those shows and they needed a drummer. So they came and asked me, do you want to, jam with us, play with us? And I said, sure. So they came over, we played, we got along great. We became fast friends, and then the band was born. We started playing UMass and getting some buzz, playing dorms. It was really fun, and
Hmm.
we recorded a 4-song EP, and in like a homemade studio in some basically a converted garage,
Right.
um, and we recorded the EP. It sounded awesome, and then I moved to New York. Then like I said, I moved to New York and I started my marketing, job, but I
Hmm.
still had one foot in the music,
Right.
and
So
eventually.
you stayed in the same band even though you were in another city.
Yes, I was
Got
commuting.
it.
I would come from New York, Brooklyn to Boston to play shows back and forth and back. Like I was driving. I lived in New York, but I was in Boston all the time. Every weekend I
Right.
was driving. It's a terrible drive too, like New York to Boston. It's just
Yeah. It's
kind of
brutal.
grind. But yeah, I was spending a lot because the band started building once I left because the EP had just been recorded and we all knew
Hmm.
it was good. And then it was summer and I was like, I'm starting my job. I'm going in the fall to New York, and I wasn't going to stop doing that.
Right.
So the buzz started to build, and then the interesting, I guess, story of that is, in Boston it started to get some momentum, and my guitar player was in a cafe, and Krist Novoselic from Nirvana was in the cafe, and they were playing our EP, and he was sitting with a guy named Mark Cates, who we didn't know, my guitar player didn't know, and
Hmm.
Krist Novoselic was tapping his foot to the song that was our song. So
Right.
he goes over to him because he's just one of those guys. He just goes over and this is my band,
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Chris Novoselic, the bass player for Nirvana. Right. Okay.
Right.
So yeah.
Thank
Go
you
ahead.
for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Um, yes. So, um, he was like, this is really good. Bass player from Nirvana is telling, this is really good, your song. And he was sitting, like I said, with this gentleman, Mark Cates. And
Hmm.
so, Mark had come from LA to Boston and started a record label called Fenway in Boston because he was a Boston bred guy and wanted to come back to his roots. But he had
Hmm.
been A&R for Geffen and DGC in the early '90s. He worked with Nirvana and Sonic Youth. That's why he was having lunch with Krist Novoselic. So, he was coming back to Boston and looking for talent in the Boston area. And so it just so happened that he heard our songs. So he started coming to our shows and hanging out in the back. And then he approached us and said, I'm building this label and you guys are a fit. I think you're a fit for it. Do you want to come on board? And so we said, yeah, do it. So we like got a manager really, whipped up a manager and signed we got signed to the label, and he knows everybody in the business. So he started shopping us to like, legit, acts to open for when they came through Boston.
Right.
And so we started getting good opening shows in Boston at real, Middle East, good clubs in the Boston area.
Hmm.
And we got the tour offer to go to Europe. He hooked that up for us. And so when I quit my job, I said, well, this is when I guess I'm quitting my job, moving from New York back to Amherst, and I'm going to see where this goes. And I was about 23 years old.
Right.
And that was the next 5 years of my life. That's what kind of kicked it off and pulled me out of the 9 to 5 world into this other crazy kind of universe for the next 5 years.
Well, that's an incredible bit of serendipity. The story about the cafe. It's that's how the music industry used to work, right? Um, so you've, I'm sure you've got some really cool stories from your tour and some of the things you did along the way, and maybe some of the bands that you played with. If you got one or two to share, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I've got a couple. I think, when I think back on that time, it's just how much fun you have in a band, like how funny, just how like how much camaraderie you build with people, especially the bands you tour with, and how fun it is and how funny. Like we're always cracking jokes and having a really fun time. And so
Hmm.
that it was just really lighthearted, and we were always just laughing, I felt like. But I think about some highlights along the way that like kept me in the band for 5 years, you know, kept me doing it. One was, um, we had, through our label, we had gotten an offer to be in a song in a movie, have our song in a movie, a song on our first record that we had a full length. Um, and um, we had, you know, gone ahead and done that. It's a movie called Waiting,
Okay.
and it's got Dane Cook, it's got Ryan Reynolds, and you may
Uh-huh.
see it on Comedy Central from time to time. They like work in a restaurant, and they like it's just shenanigans. I think it's even called it's shenanigans and all kinds of funny
Yeah.
humor in there. But so we did that, and I went back to my hometown and one of my best friends from high school, and we went to the movie theater. I didn't know when the song was going to be played. I didn't
Right.
know how long it was going to be played for or anything.
Uh-huh.
And so, we just sat in the back row. I think we might even brought some rum into the theater. We got some Cokes and we were like waiting to hear my song. And I'm sitting in, a movie theater. Like, this is like wow, this is really happening. I'm having, it felt very like really important, that moment. And it was just, it was a cool experience because I got to have my friend with me who's a huge music fan. Um,
Cool.
and I had gotten like a $500 royalty check, so I thought like, ooh, I'm gonna go to the bar after and like spend some my royalty money, and like it was just like, it was just one of those things that felt really it was a really great experience. Um,
Sure.
the other was playing the Reading Festival in the UK. I had, like I said, a huge influence on me was, grunge in the early '90s, and
Hmm.
I had watched a movie, which I highly recommend anybody go out there and put on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. It's called 1991, The Year Punk Broke. It's if anybody likes, bands like Sonic Youth, the Ramones,
Yeah.
Dinosaur Jr., Nirvana,
Yeah.
it's basically tour footage of a European tour they did. But there's a ton of Reading footage, and it's a
Hmm.
huge festival in the UK where there's like, I don't know, 20,000 people. It's a huge outdoor festival
Right.
out there, like Lollapalooza or something. They have it every year. And so I grew up watching that movie over and over and over and over. And then I got to do the Reading Festival in 2004 with Red Yellow, and it
Awesome.
was sort of surreal to be like able to play that festival that I had sort of dreamed about playing when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So it was another one of those milestone moments when I'm like, I can't believe this is like actually happening. And there was White Stripes were headlining it, Morrissey, The Roots, New York Dolls, Franz Ferdinand,
Oh,
Block Party,
cool.
MC5. Some of the guys reunited, The Roots. So it was
Wow.
like really cool to have all access backstage, to with all these huge bands, and it was just really, it was a great experience. So that was another kind of marquee experience. And the other last quick one was we did a John Peel session. I don't know if folks know who John Peel is, but at BBC
Hmm.
Radio, he passed away, but he sort of was a tastemaker in
Hmm.
the UK on the BBC. So he would play bands that he really appreciated, and he would like hand select bands. So he selected us to come on his show and
Wow.
record a session. So we got to go to Maida Vale Studios, which is like this iconic Peel session, recording BBC recording building.
Hmm.
Um, and so, our producer had produced Nirvana Peel sessions, and he'd been doing it for like ever. And it was just like all these great bands. But we flew over from Boston to London, got into London at like 7 a.m., didn't sleep on the flight over, picked up our
Uh-huh.
tour manager, went right to the studio, no sleep, got right into the sessions. You're 23, you can kind of do that. I would,
Yeah, you could pull it off then.
but like, we went right in, no sleep. I don't even know how many hours I was up straight. Played the session, did about 4 tracks, took a break to go to the pub, had fish and chips, went back, mixed it all, and I think I was passing out by the end. We were just all falling asleep in our chairs. But we walked down the hallway of the studio building, and one of the engineers goes, "Oh, you see in that room, that's where the Beatles did all their orchestral work." And I
Wow.
was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Like, I'm a huge Beatles fan. I like
Hmm.
obsessed. And I was like, "Oh my God," I almost like fell over. I'm like, "You kidding me?" But he's very nonchalant. Um, but those are like a few different, just really marquee, I think, experiences that I had that are really memorable. And it was sort
That's
of like that taste of like a dream coming true. It wasn't like rock stardom, but for me, it was like validation that the work I had put in had paid off. And
Yep.
because I really believed and dreamed that I wanted to do those some of those things, that
Hmm.
it actually happened. It was
Yeah.
like, wow, you know, here I am talking to you. I'm not like a big rock star or anything like that, but it just felt really good at the time, to have the
Yeah.
momentum.
Yeah, no, that's really really cool. I love those stories, and there's so many parallels in my own life. Although my band wasn't as successful as yours, but I just so many things are similar. But that's a story for another time. Um, so
I got a ton. I had to
yeah,
pare down three. I had to really think hard about this. Like, there's all sorts of different kinds of stories. There's, more racy. There's we had a lot of wild experiences. But I really felt like those are the three like highlights of my time with the band. So for me, they
yeah.
were really the most important
Well,
stories.
maybe some of the listeners would like to share a beer with you and dig a little bit deeper into some of those stories.
I got plenty. Hit me up if you want to chat, because I'll yeah, I'm happy
Uh,
to
All right, so this
reminisce.
is your route wasn't the traditional, hey, go to college and apply for jobs and get in on the ground floor, and then you build a career from there. You had this really awesome experience in between. Are there any lessons that you draw from your days as a musician that you've been able to then apply to your professional career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. People think the rock and roll lifestyle is all fun and games, like sex, drugs, rock and roll, like all this. It's really hard work, and it's
Hmm.
really a lot of branding yourself and marketing yourself
Right.
and running a small business. You're
Yeah.
doing everything. Um, so it was a ton of work. It was very grueling, ton of fun.
Hmm.
But I think a few key things, and some of this just applies to life post music, for a full-time music career for me, like taking some lessons in
Hmm.
to the working world, because I've done a lot of different things in my career over the past 11 years. I've constantly like kind of stepping into different roles and flexing and challenging in new ways. But I think the if I had to like boil it down, I'd say practice is huge. you know
Hmm.
like I mentioned, I practiced for a year when I was, before touching a drum kit. I do was called, just the rudiments of how to play, the foundation of how to play, so
Hmm.
that when I sit behind the drums, I just play without having to think too much about what I'm doing, because that just gets in the way of the creativity and the moment, the expression.
Yep.
But if had I not practiced so hard and so long, I wouldn't be able to do that. So practicing your craft in insights, whatever your profession, for this audience specifically, practicing and honing your craft is key to
Hmm.
be experimental and to flex on the fly,
Yep.
stay nimble and agile. So that one is huge for me. Um, Teamwork is another huge component of that. So, you know, we C-Space is a consulting company. We work with our client teams and
Hmm.
with our internal teams. So, when we partner with a client, like we are their team. We are an extension of their team.
Right.
So you need to be a great teammate, and that doesn't mean being a yes man or just going along, because in music sometimes the part isn't good enough, sometimes the chords aren't good enough, sometimes the lyrics could use a little work, sometimes someone will tell you, that drum part is a little stale. Can we try, and you got to say, yeah, let's try something different. Okay. You got to be very open. You can't be too much ego and too hard headed when you're writing music as a unit, which we did. It wasn't like we had a John Lennon or a Paul McCartney. We had four people. Everybody was building the music 25% across the four of us.
Right.
So you had to take criticism and you had to give it. And you couldn't, then you had to go have a beer and just be like, cool. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean? So there's that collaborative teamwork where you have to be constructive with each other,
Right.
give some tough love, and just know how to work with people's personalities.
Right.
So that's a huge component. And then the last thing, especially when I think about like my C space and what we do, is this blend of art and science and music. It's kind of interesting because for me, there's a lot of technically gifted musicians. Like they can
Hmm.
play the technicals, especially drummers, but
Yep.
they don't have the feel.
Yep.
You know, like Levon Helm from the band has the feel, and he does, and um, there's just certain drummers or certain ways to play that you know supersede just technical ability. So when I think about insights, I think you could have all the data or scientific, you know, data out there at your fingertips, but without the emotional feel of a customer,
Hmm.
without that deeper level understanding,
Hmm.
you're missing a piece. So you have to blend the art and the science, I think, to be a great musician. You have
Hmm.
to be technically sound and also artistic and have feel where you can get to a deeper level. And with insights work, you need to have great solid data about your customer, but you also need to have feel and emotion and understanding of them at a subconscious level. So
Right.
those are the big three for me. And I use those every day.
Yeah, that very much resonates with me on both sides, music as well as the insight space. So C space is, I think, always been considered a forward thinker. And so I'm interested to know from your perspective, being there now and kind of seeing where things are headed for you and perhaps for the industry. Any thoughts that you have on where the industry might be headed or what's important?
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually, it almost feels like a plant question, but it's not, for the audience. But we actually just wrapped up our first ever virtual event, global event called the Better Why Conference, which is all about building the future of insights with insights
Mhm.
leaders, kind of debating and creating the future together.
Cool.
As part of that, like I personally sat in on about 30 plus interviews with key insight leaders across companies like Salesforce, Bacardi, Mars, huge organizations. So we talked to the insights leaders there and asked them questions and got their perspectives and put that all kind of in a blender,
Hmm.
and said, okay, let's pull some threads out of this. And we're writing a report on that actually, which is going to come out in a few weeks. Um, and what came out of those conversations and what I hear from clients, there's a few things that are top of mind as we look to the future. You know, you got to bring together the right data sets to get the breakthrough insights. So I know data is very prevalent. It's on everybody's mind, but you really need to bring that together. You got to find the way to marry that data with the least amount of friction as possible so that you can get to the insight. That's one. Two is insights really is transitioning. And I think COVID's accelerated this, um, transitioning from a form of validation to insights being the headlights of the organization. So even up to the top, like the C-suite, they need to know what people are thinking, what customers are thinking now, because routines have changed, mindset has changed. there's been massive disruption. So it's instead of just being a validator, you're now asked to be a future forward thinker in the organization and to lead the organization with the customer. I have that unique perspective.
Right.
So that's two. And then kind of along with that is positioning insights leaders, as strategic partners to the business.
Mhm.
They're not, you've got to be a partner. You've got to be strategic. You got to think strategically to help the business to grow. Um, and and also, this is top of mind for a lot of folks, given everything that's going on in our country, is the need to really be inclusive and to bring diversity into insights. You know,
Right.
there's a lot of focus now on racial equality and just being diverse and understanding your diverse consumer sets. And a lot of times as researchers, we sit around and we all kind of look like each other, and we all we need to bring in the diverse mindset and attitudes and thoughts and perspectives of the diverse consumer set.
Mhm.
So research has to kind of shift gears and lead the way there too.
Yeah.
um, so those are a few of the big things that have come out of our conversations that we were putting together in the report, and there'll be a bunch more detail on all of those things.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to that actually. So thinking about either personally or professionally, some other media, be it podcasts or books or old school blogs or whatever. What are you following, or what do you get inspiration from?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll just do a shameless plug for our Outside In, which is the C Space podcast hosted
Yeah.
by our CEO Charles Travail. It is really a great podcast to listen to. We just had the CMO of Microsoft I think that just dropped. That episode just has been released. But
Cool.
if you're in insights, customer experience, strategy, I can't recommend, although I am biased, can't recommend, a better medium to kind of hear from the biggest leaders, in some of the biggest organizations about how they think about the customer.
Right.
So I would recommend that. Um, just out of personally or just out of general interest, I find I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. I like his work a lot. He had, his podcast I think is number one or is usually at the top of the list there. So I listen to his podcast a lot and see what he has going on. And from that, um, I've found, you mentioned a few books. I really like a book by a gentleman named Chris Voss, who wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, and he was a former
Okay.
FBI hostage negotiator, and he wrote a book about negotiation.
Hmm.
Um, just a real interesting book, just for general business or just human relations, because he teaches the techniques that the FBI uses in life or death situations. How you
Right.
talk to people, the phrasing you use, your tone, kind of how to use words. And it's really a page turner because he talks about these amazing situations he's been in
Right.
with bank hostages, and then he brings it back to a business principle. So it's a page turner. It's really an interesting book. So I'd highly recommend people check that out if they're interested in that kind of thing.
Cool.
And the last one I'll mention is a gentleman named Jocko Willink, who's a
Yeah.
former Navy SEAL, and he has a book called Extreme Ownership, which is just solid business advice about how to play on a team, how to be a great leader in your organization. If you're in insights, you need to lead the business. You need to become a leader, and he really just tells you how to do that effectively. Again, using military stories about him being in the field in military operations and bringing that back to how it applies to business. I guess I just really
Yeah.
like these high stakes kind of stories that keep me captivated and then also give me a principle. So
Yeah.
I think that's how I learn. I like to be entertained, but also learn about business. So I'd recommend a few of those things.
It's Jocko Willink that got me getting up at 4:30 a.m. every morning to work out with my daughter last school year. So I follow him too. So
Cool.
yeah, it's good stuff. So I have to ask. I have to ask. You're in music. I know you've got good taste. So you're stranded on a desert island. You've got 3 records at your disposal of your choice for the end of your days. What are
Man, I mean, yeah, this is a tough one because there's just so many. But again, like this, like I think like stories from my music days, I think about the biggest impact on my life. Um, I picked three. The first one is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, which I fell in love with when I first heard it. It just sounded perfect. And when I listen to it, I always hear something unique. And I
Hmm.
actually love to listen to the instrumental version of that album because I think Brian Wilson
Interesting.
legitimately is a genius. And if you listen to the instrumental version of Pet Sounds, which came out in their box set anniversary edition, it's just the backing instrumentation. They had some of the best musicians playing complicated, intertwined melodies and harmonies. I love listening to that because and it's recorded in such a rich way, sort of that Phil Spector wall of sound sort of
Right.
style. So innovative for the time when it was released in like '66.
Hmm.
So that's one for sure. That was a lock. I was like, yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
The other couple were a little hard, but I picked Quadrophenia by the Who for my second because I love Keith Moon. He's my favorite drummer, and
Absolutely.
I love Tommy, but something about Quadrophenia and the story resonates with me and how I kind of, I don't know, guess going through adolescence and sort of a coming of age, like it felt really close to me.
Hmm.
Like having multiple, these different kind of personalities and thoughts, and you're growing up and you're confused. It just, the story and the drums and the music, I mean, just really awesome. And plus it's a double album, so I kind of cheated and I got two for one. um, and I actually saw the Who do Quadrophenia in high school with Ringo Starr's son on drums.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
Zach Starkey. So that was an amazing concert. Um, and the third I picked was a Funhouse by the Stooges, because something about the trashy, experimental, jazzy almost play on that album, and it was actually recorded live with a PA in a room. Like it was like legit recorded live.
Yeah.
Um, I love that record. The way it sounds, the way it makes me feel, the groove that it has. Again, the feel. It
Yeah.
has a feel to it that just puts me in a vibe, and I can just listen to it in the background. And there's these long kind of jams on it that it's just somewhat like almost like meditative, but also really energetic and loud. And you can have like a six pack and listen to it, and it's just fun. Um, so those are my three, and there's plenty others, but
Yeah.
those are really special albums to me.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing Red Yellow. I'm not terribly surprised actually to hear all three of those choices. So the influence, I can pick out little pieces of influence in all of those in the music that you created. So that's really cool. All right, Paul, this has been an awesome chat. I really appreciate it. So much fun. I can't wait till we can continue this conversation. We got so much more to chat about. But in the meantime, I just want to say, hey, thanks again for joining me on the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. It was a blast.
All right, cool. Take it easy.
All right.